This is From Justin to Kane, a podcast where Mike Robertson and Bob LaRue watch one critically acclaimed film and one terrible film and talk about how they are the same.
What's up, Kanines?
Hey, Kanines.
Hey.
You know what we didn't bring up last week, Mike?
What?
Our new cryptocurrency.
Oh, yeah, right. Our new cryptocurrency. Yeah, we're getting into the crypto game.
We should start with crypto and work our way into the two films we're doing this week.
I actually do feel like if we got into cryptocurrency, that it would be actually pretty good advertising. I don't think it will really make a whole lot of money. I think our coin would really plummet fast, but I think that we would at least get some good advertising out of it. Like a podcast that nobody really listens to has made a cryptocurrency.
A cryptocurrency you can mine.
And then people will be like, what is this podcast? And they'll listen to it. But anyway, we've been talking about starting a cryptocurrency called From Justin to Coin, which is...
If you like the idea, tell us and we'll friggin' do it.
Yeah, well, I dare us to do it. I dare you to dare us to do it.
How hard could it really be? You know what I mean?
Yeah, who knows?
Really, how hard could it be?
Nobody knows how cryptocurrency works, so...
There isn't a single person on this planet who knows what cryptocurrency really is.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll see, but yeah, From Justin to Coin, basically just a joke, but we might make it happen, ?
Okay, Mike, what are the two films we're doing this week?
So, we wanted to have a little bit of fun this week and kind of shake things up a little bit. We're kind of doing the same old format, but instead of watching one great movie and one bad movie and talking about the similarities, we're going to watch one great movie and one bad movie, bad in quotes, and talk about the differences. And the reason is because we're talking about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And then we're also talking about the shot-for-shot remake, Gus Van Sant Psycho. So,
yes.
I mean, obviously there's a lot of similarities to the point that why would we waste our time?
List them. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting just to have watched both of these movies back to back and talk about why these movies exist. Because the 98 Psycho that Gus Van Sant made is a bit controversial. If only because people are like, why do you make this? Mm-hmm. This seems pointless. But the same could be said about why did Hitchcock make his movie? That also could be pointless.
Well, you know what's an interesting thing is Hitchcock was famous for remaking his own movies.
How so?
He remade The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Oh, right, yeah.
With James Stewart after his original I think he did it to 3 films. I forget the other 2. But it's interesting that there's a remake of this very famous Hitchcock film. But Hitchcock himself exercised the remake. He remade his own films because he thought he could do better. And almost in every case, they were better.
Well, good for him.
So it's kind of interesting that him of all people would get a remake that's shot for shot.
Yeah. You know what movie he should remake?
What?
The Trouble with Harry.
Do you like that film?
No, I didn't care for it. I was expecting it to be funny or interesting in a murder context, like suspenseful, but it was neither.
Do you want it to be shot for shot?
No.
Oh, okay.
Go do something different, Hitchcock. Also, I mean, he's dead, so he can't really do
what?
It. But
Hitchcock is dead?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
I mean,
have you seen the film starring Anthony Hopkins where he plays Alfred Hitchcock making Psycho called something? I can't remember.
Isn't it just called Hitchcock?
Yes, maybe. And it's about him and his wife writing the script and making the film.
Did you see the Will Smith movie about Hitchcock where he plays?
I did. Where he's a superhero.
Yeah. He's a superhero who. No. He's
an alcoholic. And
you're
lives
thinking
in a
of Hancock. Oh, interesting.
Oh, Hancock.
Yeah,
Hitch.
Yeah,
where he's the love guru.
He's the love guru, but not the love guru, not our love guru.
Not the OG love guru.
Not the titular love guru.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Hancock.
Yeah, well,
it's interesting.
Yeah.
If you put the two titles together, it's Hitchcock minus Han.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
I know. That is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Is there a conspiracy in which Will Smith really loves Alfred Hitchcock and is trying to become him? Also, I feel like I just have to preemptively apologize. There is a table saw in use outside of my house, and you can hear it, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's 2 p.m. on a weekday, and, houses got to get built, so just buckle up.
Buckle up.
Anyways, okay, so the two films, Psycho and Psycho. Yeah, what a wild ride this was. I really enjoyed seeing... actually, I've seen two films back-to-back where the titular character masturbates. That being, Vince Vaughn in Psycho. He's the titular Psycho.
Yeah.
And I'm watching Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel, and he jacks off onto a car. So a lot of masturbating going on, and both made in the late 90s.
As one does.
Yeah. Is there any masturbation in the original Psycho?
No, I think it's implied if there is any.
You don't see it. Or
No.
because it's sort of implied, implied in a very obvious way. Like, you don't see the actual PP, Vince Vaughn's
Jesus.
member. Geez.
You're an adult. You're an adult, are you?
No, I'm 13 and I podcast with you, Mike.
Oh, goodness. I feel like this is illegal.
Yeah, well, it could be. But, it's much more subtle in the original Psycho, 1960s Psycho.
Yeah. Well, also the Psycho came out right after the film code changed.
Oh, really?
I can't remember the exact timeline, but as I understand it, Psycho was kind of, in retrospect, kind of seen as a response to the production code in the 60s.
Well, the production code got firmer, right?
No, didn't it relax?
Maybe it got relaxed. But there's a very famous dispute between Alfred Hitchcock and the production code. And there was even a scene that had to be reshot, the opening. And he fought them. And then he finally said, like, sure, I'll reshoot the opening scene. And either it was like the production code people never showed up or he never showed up. And then the film finally got its rating and was released.
Oh, no, actually, I read about this.
Oh, okay. What happened?
No, it was in the shower scene.
Oh, the shower scene.
And the production code people were like, we can see one of Janet Leigh being the main character, or the woman who, spoiler alert, dies a third into the film.
Titular dies in the film.
Okay.
Just kidding. I just wanted to use the word titular. Anyways, continue.
Well, titular in that she's naked and they thought they could see one of her breasts. So,
but plot twist.
But Hitchcock... So he's like, okay, we'll recut it. And so he basically just took the original print he gave them, didn't do anything, just like left it untouched. And then he resubmitted it as they had originally seen it. And then they changed their positions. Like they were like, okay, we can't see it now. So he just kind of played with their brains a little bit. He's a bit of a prankster, as we will learn when we talk about the movie.
Oh, interesting. Also, that scene was they shot that for a really long time. It was like 2 weeks or something, wasn't it?
Yes. So they did shoot that scene. It took 1 week.
Oh, 5 days?
Yeah, it was 7 days to shoot the shower scene. And it took them 70 camera setups. So, and the scene is only 45 seconds. But at the end, after they did all those 70 camera setups, they were like, it's been.
I feel like you wanted me to get in there on that bit, but I just let you drown.
I think you just have to say, it's been.
Yeah, that's all you need. But that's crazy because wasn't it shot, both films were shot in the exact same length of time, which was like 5 weeks or something.
Something like that, yeah.
So what's interesting is Gus Van Sant even shot in the order that they shot the original film.
Mm-hmm.
So the first scene that was shot was Janet Leigh being pulled over by the cop.
Yeah.
And that's how they started their production of the 98 version of the film. He tried to get down to the absolute minutia in identical sort of making their film identical, both in like the approach, the literal filmmaking, as well as the film itself.
Yeah, but not the release.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I can start telling you some facts about the original Psycho, but when they released it, they kind of released it in a small release at first in a couple of major cities. And then once
you're talking about the original?
The original Psycho, yeah. And then it built some hype. And then when it went into a wide release, it was like really hyped up. But then also Hitchcock did all of the press himself. He did not let any of his stars do it. And also he had very, very strict rules that movie theaters had to follow in order to show the movie. Like they could
you weren't allowed to walk in late, right?
You weren't allowed to walk in late, no. And there was like signs and standees and like I think maybe even a little trailer beforehand that told the audience to like not spoil it for your friends. So it was like, yeah, and Hitchcock made a big deal about just the twist, how he's like, you don't want this spoiled for you, and so don't spoil it for others. Don't be like a dick.
Right.
His
he
words.
said that literally, right? He's
like,
quoted as saying, don't be a dick.
Jerk.
That's pretty good Hitchcock.
Well, you just have to act like you're 90% jowl.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah, okay, start hitting us. Well, I guess that's the first difference, because the 98 film was like wide release. It was like supposed to be an event. There was lots of hype. Whereas the original Psycho was like a sleeper hit.
Well, it was a sleeper hit at first, and then it became an event.
Right.
Like
whereas the 98 film tried to be an event, and it wasn't. It just didn't happen. And it made no money, and it was eviscerated by critics.
Yeah, like the budget for the original Psycho was less than $1 million in 1959 money, I guess, because that's when they made it.
Yeah.
And they made $50 million back then.
Wow, that's a lot of from just in a coin. Am I right? The film was made for 60. The 98 film was made for 60 million.
Oh wow! And how much did it make?
It made 37 worldwide and 21 domestically. So it didn't quite break even. It made a little bit less than they spent.
Well, then there you go. Yeah. So a real reversal of expectations.
Yeah. You're telling me.
Not unlike a lot of the plot elements in Psycho.
What?
I mean, there's a lot of surprises. The whole movie is based on surprises.
Well, you know what's funny though?
What?
The newest Psycho has absolutely no surprises, because you've seen the original and you're just well aware of what's going to come next.
Yeah.
Which is also like an interesting sort of experiment.
Yeah.
It's like a film literally built on a surprise and a twist. And then you watch a remake and you're like, well, all the surprises and twists are the same. I'm going to watch this anyways. Is this still compelling? You know, that's an interesting argument and an interesting experiment.
I mean, normally we're like, this is a great movie, this is a bad movie. But I actually didn't think the remake was bad necessarily, because it took all of the elements of the original and just kind of redid them, but with less interesting actors, dare I say.
Yeah, but I will say I loved the casting. I thought it was like very fun. Like it was quintessential late 90s casting.
Yeah, and
like the Philip Baker Hall was like back up on his rise to fame.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
You know, after like Boogie Nights and shit, and Viggo Mortensen, Julianne Moore, William H. Macy. It's actually interesting. It's like all the Paul Thomas Anderson regulars are in this movie. I'm surprised John C. Reilly wasn't in Psycho.
I know, yeah, that's true. He should have been.
But anyway, yeah, you know, like it's just the casting was super fun. I thought.
Yeah, whereas the casting in the original is not fun.
No, it's not.
It's a big
fun.
difference.
Very serious. Big difference.
I did think that Vince Vaughn was a bad choice.
I agree.
And he did a actively bad job in the movie. I
agree.
will say that he was in his, like a lot of people know Vince Vaughn as a comedy guy, but in the late 90s, he was more known as kind of an indie film darling, which is why Gus Van Sant probably thought he was worth working with on this.
Most definitely. And he played several serial killers.
Yeah.
And sickos in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Like Clay Pigeons. He played a real weirdo in that movie. Plays a weirdo in this movie.
Yeah. So, but I just, for whatever reason, I think maybe it was the direction or maybe it was Vince Vaughn's performance, but I thought that was one of the weak links of the movie was Norman Bates. He just, I mean, his fashion was bad. He had like wild shirts on.
Well, he was dressed like it was the 60s. Right. It's interesting. This film was like a time capsule in so many ways. Like the hairdos, like Viggo Mortensen's driving a GMC pickup truck from the mid 50s, and he's dressed like a 50s cowboy. Vince Vaughn is dressed like a 60s beatnik.
Yeah.
But then Julianne Moore has a Walkman. Yeah. And very explicitly states that she needs to get her Walkman before they leave.
Yeah, that was a wild scene.
Yeah. That was one of the, it's one of the differences because like all the dialogue is almost word for word. The screen, It's literally like the actors received the original Psycho screenplay as the screenplay. Yeah. When they were offered their roles, which is interesting. And some of them were confused and they like had to contact their agent and be like, oh, I got the wrong script. And then Gus Van Sant had to contact them directly and say, no, this is the script.
See, that is what I think is cool about this movie, even if it kind of fails in a lot of ways. Can you think of another movie that did a remake of another movie like so strictly? What's interesting about movies in theater is when you go to a play, you're watching a play and it's the same script. Nobody remakes a play or stages a play and redoes the
dialogue
script.
And the stage directions.
Yeah. They just kind of like they'll direct it differently. But a play is a play. Whereas in movies, it can be, if they're going to remake something, they're like, well, we're going to start from scratch and we're just going to use the seed of the idea. It might just be because the auteur idea of cinema has kind of ruined it, so you can't remake something in the same way. Or even like a song, like people will cover a song and they're not going to change the lyrics.
No, actually, that's a really good point. Film is kind of the exception, isn't it?
Yeah, and people are actively mad about this Psycho movie because it is the same script and it's shot for shot, but it's like, well, that's kind of, it is a remake. They just literally remade it and updated it for the 90s.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. I'm not sure that it 100% succeeded, but the sum of its parts, it should still be a good movie because the performances generally aren't terrible. The casting is great. And it does take a couple of liberties and it loses a lot of the subtlety of the original, but overall, I don't know. It's like, why is this bad? The original movie didn't have to exist, so it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that this one shouldn't exist. They're both just a movie.
I wonder if it's neither here nor there because like the 98 version wouldn't exist without the 1960 version. But I wonder if the 98 version was the only one in existence, would it have been revered? Like if Gus Van Sant had just made the film the way he had made it. Yeah. And it was the first one ever.
Well, yeah, people would think it was awesome. Because it was also a year before The Sixth Sense kind of made twist endings a thing again.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, Psycho would have
been
the movie.
Shout out to M. Night.
Yeah, shout out to M. Night. So Psycho would have been the movie that made twists cool again.
Right.
Because people would be like, I can't believe they killed Anne Hesh in the first 30 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, it's just interesting. We're talking about a film that has to like live within the orbit of the original film, and every reaction or feeling is due to the original. Yeah. And their proximity. And it's like, I mean, by virtue of it being a shot for shot remake, it can't stand on its own two legs. It has to live with the other film. Yeah. But I don't know. It's certainly interesting. It's like there's nothing wrong with it, except for maybe Vince Vaughn. But maybe Vince Vaughn would have been really cool because like Anthony Perkins did such a cool job as Norman Bates originally. And perhaps if Vince Vaughn was the OG Norman Bates, we'd be like, wow, that was an amazing performance.
It's true.
The other interesting thing is with remakes, normally like directors shy away from showing the pre-existing material to their actors, but Gus Van Sant was like absolutely like he had a VHS of Psycho and they would watch it every day to like reference it for performance and for framing, which is interesting. That's like really the antithesis of remakes for filmmakers.
Because like Gus Van Sant is not he's not like a hack.
No.
I mean, I guess it depends on your opinion of him, but he's not a hack. He's like a really creative, cool indie filmmaker guy who made an impact in the 90s.
And he's made lots of good stuff in the 2000s too.
Yeah. So,
lest we forget Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, exactly. And I also heard that the Psycho movie was a kind of not an FU to the studio system, but they were like, well, you're kind of a big deal in the indie circuit, so we're going to give you a studio movie to make. And then he was like, well, I want to remake Psycho. And so he's like, well, this is the only time that I had this opportunity to make a faithful remake of a movie in this way. Like, he'd never get the chance to remake this film with a studio budget with big actors and stuff. So that's what I read, at least. He said that he just wanted to take the big swing and see if it worked.
Yeah. I think that's great. I love how like ballsy and kind of ridiculous the whole thing is. Like, it's fun. It's and not, you know what? And I know we shouldn't do similarities, but maybe a big similarity is both films were directed by pranksters.
It's true. Yeah. You have to be a prankster to really appreciate the source material, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you have any more info on the original?
I mean, I didn't even really give any.
Well, we'll get into it, buddy.
We've just been kind of bouncing around.
I don't have all day, Mike. I do literally have all day.
Oh,
but anyways, let's talk about the 1960 movie because it's
chronologically first,
and dare I say, way more interesting than the 1998 film.
Well, I think that's up for debate, actually, based on what we just talked about a couple minutes ago.
I mean, okay, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Psycho came out in 1960, based on a book.
Yes.
The book was written by Robert Bloch, Bloch. Bloch. I assume it's just Robert Bloch. Bloch?
No, it's Bloch, yeah.
Yeah, so it's based on a news story about a man who kept his mother's body in his house in Wisconsin, whose name is Ed Gein. So Ed Gein, the famous serial killer. Psycho, the book, is based on that, and the movie is based on that.
He's a serial killer? He killed more than his mom? The actual guy?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I don't know too much about Ed Gein, but I do know. Or Gein? Ed Gein?
Is it Ed Gein?
It could be Ed Gein, so we'll just say it's Ed Gein.
Anyways.
So I got a bunch of my notes from a book called Hitchcock Truffaut, where Francois Truffaut of the French New Wave, which we talked about in our last episode, and also he's in the right bank.
Right bank New Wave filmmaker, very good.
Yeah, who directed none other than Chute le Play de Piano and Jules et Jim.
Yeah.
So he kind of interviews Hitchcock in this book at length, and they talk about all of his movies as filmmakers, and it's really fascinating. So I got a lot of facts from the man's mouth himself, Hitchcock.
The man's mouth himself, his jowls himself.
Yeah, these are right from the jowls.
Yuck.
So in the original book, apparently, it indicates that the mother like exists as a separate character. But because it's all in your imagination, when that rug is pulled out from under you, it's kind of like a fun trick. Whereas in the movie, they have to be a little bit more creative about the fact that the mother is actually, spoiler alert, Norman Bates, and that the mother is dead, and he's just kind of gone mad.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, there's like the mother is treated as like another character, and then once the ending happens, you're like, oh, I was tricked. A prank. Yet another prank.
Another prank.
And the whole so speaking of pranks, basically the way that the movie's structured was kind of intentionally done so to prank the audience. So the opening scenes with Janet Leigh, they made those purposefully long and also like really kind of obsessed with details. So you keep getting invested in her journey. So, just like the kind of dumb scene where she's like calculating the numbers of how much she's already spent, like the scene with the cop, the scene with the car, getting a car and stuff, all that stuff off the top, which when you're watching, you're like, feels like they could have cut some of this out, or it doesn't really need to be here. It is purposeful when you rewatch it because it's like, oh, they pranked us, because the audience gets really invested in it, and then they kill her right away, and then they're like, what is this movie even? So it's good that he put so much energy and effort into pranking the audience so early in the film. And also he remarked that, normally if you were making a movie like this, Janet Leigh would probably play the sister instead of the person who got murdered because, she's a big star.
Yeah.
But he thought it was a funny prank to make the murder victim in the movie the star of the film, just because the audience would be like, okay, she's not going to die. She's like Janet Leigh, she's the star. But then she gets killed right away, and then everybody's like, what? I got pranked. You got hitched, is what they said back then.
You got Hancock. Just kidding.
You got jowled.
You got jowled.
A JOWL''D. You got jowled. The shower scene, I already kind of talked about how long it took them to shoot it and all that stuff. There's actually an entire documentary just about the shower scene you can watch.
Oh, really?
Somebody made a documentary that just basically deconstructs that scene because it's so meticulous.
And it's called, instead of Golden Hour, it's called Golden Shower.
Yeah. Oh, good. Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
And it is intercut with people peeing on each other. Yeah.
Yes. Just making bits over here because Mike's doing all the heavy lifting on an intellectual level. Continue.
Oh, thank you. So when they shot that shower scene, there was a fake torso with like blood packs and stuff in it that they kind of just like stabbed at. So that's how they kind of did some of the stabby parts. Plus also Janet Leigh only appears as a head, hand, or shoulder. She was not naked in the scene. They actually had a nude model come in and be in some of the wide shots. So that's a kind of fun fact.
That's very interesting. Was she just like she just didn't want to do it, or what?
Oh, I mean, she was a big star.
I guess she was. I literally haven't seen her in anything except Psycho.
Who's her daughter?
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis, yeah.
Yeah.
Janet Leigh had a 7-year deal with Paramount. And so this was kind of the last movie. And so she was able to be hired for this film for $25,000, which was, I guess, much less than she's normally paid. So she took a pay cut. And that was as a result of just the movie being made for so cheap because Hitchcock wanted to make this movie based on this book. The Paramount people were like, this is too expensive. We're not going to make it for your usual budget. Plus, it's kind of like too violent, kind of too sinful. Hitchcock was like, all right, well, we'll make it for cheap in black and white, and we can use my TV crew. They originally were like, no, we have all of our sound stages booked. You're not going to like make your cheap ass movie on our stuff. But he said, okay, fine. I'll finance the project myself. And he used his own crew. As long as Paramount would distribute it, then they didn't really have to foot most of the costs. So, and he also turned down his normal director's fee of $250,000 per movie, and got some stake in the movie instead. So I'm sure he made quite a lot of money. So it was a good gamble.
Oh, yeah.
Paid off. Way to go.
Big time.
Yeah, it was so cheap that
pulled off.
In total, the crew costs were $62,000. So Janet Leigh made $25,000. I think Anthony Perkins made $40-something thousand, which he wasn't as big of a star, or was he even a star at all?
No,
he was kind of an
a bunch
unknown.
of TV, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that like the sexism of the time, even though Janet Leigh was a huge star, she was still getting paid less than
almost half.
Yeah.
Like literally 50 cents to the dollar. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Although I guess she also was taking a pay cut just to get out of a deal at Paramount. So maybe there's no sexism there. I assume there probably is because it's a Hitchcock movie.
Probably a little bit of both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
And Hitchcock, famous perv.
Famous perv.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did shoot it at this place called Review Studios, which was the same place his television show was made. And the whole movie was shot on a budget of $807,000. So pretty dang cheap, especially compared to now, but relative to even movies at the time. And it was written by one of his writers on Hitchcock Presents 2, who wrote the first draft of the screenplay, but then Hitchcock was like kind of unhappy with it, so he hired this guy named Joseph Stefano to take over and finish it up. So we kind of talked about the production code as before, and this movie is kind of a good example of what movies were like right after the production code. And as the 60s went on, and into the 70s, things got even more lewd and lascivious. Yeah, so this movie was kind of unprecedented at the time in terms of how sexuality and violence was shown. Like in the very first scene, you see the characters with, their shirts off, and Janet Leigh's in a bra, which I guess was not really a thing you really saw that much. And also people having sex before marriage was also kind of taboo. And Hitchcock said that, they felt like they had to do what the kids were doing at the time, which was, kids would not watch Psycho and be like, this is cool. They'd be like, Psycho's lame, or whatever they said. They'd say, what did they say in the 60s? This Psycho's not groovy, man. So
that's such a long sentence to diss something,
Yeah, they'd be like,
this is so not groovy.
Yeah, this movie's a square.
And, Hitchcock famously was like, I just want my movies to be groovy,
Yeah.
Groovy movies, baby. Groovy movies. Straight from the jowls out of that Truffaut Hitchcock book.
Yeah, exactly. So Hitchcock was talking about how he's like, well, kids these days want to see things that are a little bit more lewd and lascivious. So, kids wouldn't be an unmarried couple hanging out in a hotel room, but like sleeping in separate beds,
Yeah.
And he even wanted Janet Leigh to be topless in the scene, but he couldn't pull it off. So, famous perv.
Famous perv. Super famous perv.
So, only a couple more notes. Once again, straight from the jowls. So, Hitchcock, he talked about how the house and the motel in the movie are kind of signified as being really creepy. But actually, he thought it was funny because that was like a style of construction in Northern California at the time, which is what they called at the time California Gothic or California gingerbread, I guess. So that's just what houses looked like. But for whatever reason in the rest of the country, people were like, oh, that's so creepy. But that's just kind of the style of architecture of the era. So it kind of ages as well, I think. Like when you watch it now, it seems like it established the tropes a little bit, even though that was like, well, this is just a house and the motel, and they're both kind of creepy. And Truffaut remarked about how he thought that the visuals of the house and the motel were cool because one's like a vertical line and one of them is a horizontal line. And he said it just is visually pleasing.
Le visuel de plaisir.
Yeah, exactly.
Mon eyes, yeah, great.
Yeah, so also if you're into memes, it feels like is this lost?
Super groovy.
There's so much to say about this movie, and I could only do so much research in the amount of time. Plus, also, we don't want to bore people to death. And also, like, go read a frickin' book. Again, like, just get out there and read a damn ass book.
Yeah, don't make us do all the reading here, people. Come on.
So
get off your lazy ass and then get back on your lazy ass, but now you're holding a book. Crack that sucker open and use your fucking eyes, people. Read. Shit.
Preach.
Yeah. Read a fucking book, people. Or an ebook if you need that. That's fine. Or an audiobook. Whatever. Use your damn ears.
Use your
canines.
damn ears.
You got eyes. You got jowls. You got teeth.
You've got exceptional hearing as canines.
Yes. And your smell is really good, too. But that's irrelevant because you can't smell a fucking movie and you can't really... Yeah, you can smell a book.
Yeah,
whatever.
You can smell.
Anyways, that's neither here nor there. Read a book.
Read a book. Give a hoot.
That's
Give a bark.
That's our read a book corner.
Yeah.
There's like 7 corners in this room, and one of them is about reading a damn book.
Yeah. Get literate, you illiterate piece of crap.
Grow some thumbs so you can turn your pages, even though you got little dog paws. Get creative. Use chopsticks, whatever. Use your tongue. Flip the page. Read. You know what I mean? Get in your dog bed. Start reading.
Yeah, dog. Use chopsticks to turn the page. You dumb dog. Okay, so one more fact, because I could go on forever about this movie. There's like so much to say about it. I kind of want you
to. It's like it's like one of the most famous movies ever. Similar to Citizen Kane, the titular Kane.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we talk sometimes about award. It was nominated for Academy Awards, but did not win any of them. It was nominated Best Director, Best Supporting Actress, Best Art Direction, Black and White, Best Cinematography, Black and White. Didn't win any.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Probably because it's too raunchy.
Yeah, it did win Best Screenplay at the Edgar Allan Poe Awards, one of our best writers.
Huh.
So, one last fact that I found fascinating. Straight from the jowls of Hitchcock, the music was done by Bernard Herrmann.
Yes.
Classic score by one of Hitchcock's old standbys. And the opening titles were done by Saul Bass, another of Hitchcock's standbys. And like Saul Bass kind of really changed the scene, so to speak, in terms of like making cool titles.
Yep.
But also Saul Bass planned out some of the scenes in the movie like via storyboards, including he helped Hitchcock with the shower scene.
Wow.
But then also Saul Bass planned out the scene with the detective coming up the stairs, another iconic scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And Hitchcock got sick one day while they were making the movie. He was kind of ill for like a day or two. So they shot it without him. They shot that scene without him.
Oh, shit.
And they just kind of used Saul Bass wasn't directing, but they used his drawings as a reference. So they got a bunch of these shots without Hitchcock being there, I guess, somehow. But then Hitchcock watched it and found that it didn't work. So they just remade that. They reshot everything.
Right.
Because the way that Saul had planned it out originally made it seem really sinister. And they didn't want to kind of give that impression until Norman Bates as the mom, I guess, comes out and stabs the detective. And that scene is like one of the big jump scares in the movie too. And it's shot in such a weird way where it's all shot from the top.
Oh, and yeah. It's super funky.
Yeah. And you're like, what is this? And then all of a sudden the character comes out of the side of the frame. It's kind of really startling, maybe just because of how disorienting the whole thing is.
And then the rear projection, like obviously fake fall.
Yeah.
But it makes it more sinister.
Yeah.
It's really compelling.
And also Hitchcock talks about how they shot it that way because if they shot it from behind, you kind of have a sense that the audience would be like, why are they not showing this character's face? There must be some sort of reason. Whereas he said, if you shoot it from the top, you at least feel like you're looking at somebody, or it doesn't seem like they're trying to obscure the face so much. So I just thought that was interesting because that's true, I think.
Yeah.
I think if the audience kind of, at a certain point, if you never see that character's face, you're like, they must be hiding this for a reason. So
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess it would be a really sort of thin line to walk, trying not to give away your own prank preemptively.
Yeah, exactly.
By avoiding things, right? Really a master prankster. Man,
I know. He's like, well,
self-control.
He's a very clever filmmaker in that he knows how to lay out scenes and put out visual information in just the perfect order, or just why to shoot it in a certain way. And it pretty much works 100% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are kind of all the facts that I got about that movie. I mean, there's more out there. There's a little website called Wikipedia, which you can find a lot of them. If you've ever heard of this website.
so condescending.
You want to learn about this damn movie? Go friggin' go on Wikipedia.
Go read a website. That's the least you can do, okay? Dog can use a mouse.
We also haven't talked about, people critique the shot-for-shot remake.
Mm-hmm.
But also there was a 3 sequels that
and Tony Perkins started directing them.
Yeah.
Right? Like he really rode that fucking machine until it died.
Well, even the original screenwriter, Joseph Stefano, he wrote the Psycho 4, which was a prequel.
Right. And it's interesting because there's also the TV show that didn't last very long called Bates Motel, which was a prequel.
That has Rihanna in it.
Really?
Yeah, she's in some part of she maybe even played like Janet Leigh's character or something. I've never watched it, so I'm just talking out of my butt here. But
yeah, geez.
I feel like I did see Psycho 2 before I saw the original Psycho.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
Or maybe Psycho 3. I saw one of the Psycho sequels long before. I didn't see the original Psycho until like maybe sometime in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember seeing one of the Psycho sequels when I was a teen. Very disappointing.
Very disappointing.
So,
Straight from Mike's jowls,
Yep,
people.
straight from the
Very
jowls.
disappointing experience with Psycho.
for the most part, yeah. So what do you got to say about the
I got lots
remake?
lots to friggin' say, Mike. Tons of shit to say. I, again, gonna preemptively apologize. There's just a big old table saw still giving her outside. I really hope the house that's being built will be beautiful because it's really fucking the audio on this end, but whatever.
Well, as long as we announce it.
Yeah, you just gotta be, there's literally nothing. I could go out and ask them to stop, but it's 3 PM on a Monday. They're not going to.
Yeah.
They gotta get that bacon and bring it home.
And it is diegetic sound. Like, we know where it's coming from. We know that it's part of the scene. It's not in your mind.
Exactly. Imagine how scary would that be if I just kept apologizing for a table saw and like you get the audio and you're like, Bob, there's absolutely nothing on this audio file suggesting that there are tools in use. And I'm like, what do you mean? Psycho released in 1998, budget of $60 million, made a little bit less than that. The critical reception was almost universally panned. Just nobody liked it. In subsequent years, though, people have kind of come out of the woodwork and they're like, actually, this might have more merit than we're giving it credit. So, like, Quentin Tarantino famously stated that he prefers the 98 Psycho to the 1960 Psycho.
Does he say why?
He says it's more real, like grittier. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it was something along, I'll just paraphrase. He said, like, there are certain moments that feel more real in the 98 version than they do in the 60 version.
Oh, interesting.
And I 100% disagree with Quentin Tarantino. Straight from his jowls, he's spitting nonsense. That's what I think. But I will say, this has like some really fun late 90s casting.
Yes.
We got Vince Vaughn playing Perv and the titular Psycho and the titular Bates, Norman Bates.
Yes.
He's several titles.
And he does bait in the film, if you know what I mean.
Oh boy, does he bait. Big time.
It's actually a very on-the-nose name because it describes the character as he does his action,
It's like, ooh, Norman is baiting.
Yeah, Norman Bates.
Behind that peephole.
Yeah.
Anne Hesh, Julianne Moore, Viggo Mortensen, William H. Macy, Robert Forster, and Philip Baker Hall.
All-star cast.
All-star cast and really fun. Like, Robert Forster and Philip Baker Hall were like on their up and up. Like they had both felt a renaissance because of Tarantino and Paul Thomas Anderson casting them both.
Yeah.
Because you got Jackie Brown bringing Robert Forster back. And then you've got Boogie Nights and whatever the hell that first movie was that Paul Thomas Anderson made with John C. Reilly about gambling in Reno, where Philip Baker Hall was one of the stars. And like they had this renaissance. And then you see them in this movie and they have very short scenes, but it's fun. This film's just like peppered with fun actors. Yeah.
And
like Julianne Moore doesn't show up for like an hour, but then she does. And it's like, oh yeah, this is fun. Because you read the credits off the top and you're like, whoa, there's some heavy hitters. And then because of the narrative structure of the film, they don't show up for a long time. But you get these fun little surprises.
Well, that's a prank, kind of.
In a way, it is a prank. And I want to say the first difference between these two films, I would say, is the directing style. Gus Van Sant is an actor's director. Yeah. And Hitchcock is famously not an actor's director. He is quoted as saying they're like cattle or cows or something, or sheep, whatever the hell he called them. Yeah. Something derogatory and rude. And he has no sort of appreciation for the craft of acting. He just like makes his films and he fills his frames and stuff. Whereas I think Gus Van Sant is more about the actor's approach and blah, blah, blah. And he said during prep of the film, tried to flesh out the characters a little more without changing the dialogue. He wanted all of the actors to find more motivation. And William H. Macy sort of has said that he worked really, really hard to make his character more fleshed out because it's so abrupt. He just shows up, dumps a bunch of exposition, and then fucking dies. So he really tried to like round out the character a little more. And William H. Macy said famously that he would have worked with Gus Van Sant if he had remade the Yellow Pages. He didn't care what it was. He just wanted to work with Gus Van Sant and fought really hard for his role of Arbogast.
Well, you know who is another big star that's in the movie that kind of goes unmentioned always?
Who?
Do you know who the actor Anne Haney is?
No, who's that?
Have you ever seen Liar Liar?
Yeah.
You know the woman who plays Jim Carrey's receptionist in that movie? The old lady with the glasses?
Oh, yeah.
She's in this movie too. She plays, what's his name? Philip Baker Hall, you say?
Oh, his wife.
His wife. She, like, in both movies, there's the police chief of the small town. His wife dials the phone for him for some reason. And so she kind of just exists to, like, call people on his behalf or something. It's kind of dumb. But it makes sense in the 60s one, but in the 90s one, it's like, what's going on? Why is she calling for him?
Yeah, that is weird, isn't it? But also, cell phones were a thing by this point, which is hilarious because they're never used.
Yeah, but she's in that movie, and I was like, oh, yeah, it's that lady. And yeah, she kind of like dials the number and smiles and hands him the thing. And that's like kind of all she does. But
I bet you she did it for $25,000 too.
I bet you she did, yeah.
That's a fun little Easter egg. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so like literally all of the characters, I guess maybe Anne Heche's boss and the other guy that he deals with aren't really celebs maybe, but you know who also is in it? Rita Wilson plays the other receptionist at Anne Heche's job.
Yep. So you know what's fun?
Tom Hanks.
Both films have... Oh, what? She's married to Tom Hanks?
That's Rita Wilson. She was in a bunch of movies in the 90s and then just kind of hasn't really acted after giving birth to Chet Hayes.
So when Tom Hanks yells Wilson in that film where he's stuck on that island, he's yelling his wife's name.
Why? Oh, yeah, right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me a second. I was like, he didn't say Rita. No, but he says Wilson.
Screaming Rita doesn't have the same ring.
Yeah, he just names his
Rita.
Oh, Rita.
Yeah.
That would have been actually a really funny joke if they named the beach ball Rita. And so people would have been like, Rita Wilson, I get it. That's funny. Very clever.
Yeah. So fun thing, there's like that legendary shot. Actually, the opening of both films is pretty legendary. But the shot that happens in the remake of Psycho, the opening that goes into the window, like flies through the air, goes into the window, and we see our two characters. That shot was conceived for the first Psycho, but they didn't have the technology or the budget.
Yeah.
So then they did a bunch of dissolves and junk. But then they were able to achieve it for Psycho. So in a way, Psycho 98 is like a more pure Hitchcock film.
Oh, interesting.
Because they had the technology to achieve the little details that he couldn't do or get away with.
Yeah.
Because of whether it be censorship or just straight up, the tech didn't exist, you know?
And also the fact that you couldn't show blood because it was in black and white. So they got away with it in the 60s, but they, you know, if it was in color, they wouldn't have been able to show it. So.
Mm-hmm. And also, yeah, there's just more blood in the 98 version than there is in the 1960 version.
Yes.
There's still not a very gruesome film, but definitely way more blood, especially in the shower scene. And another difference is when Arbogast gets stabbed, he gets one slice in the face in the 1960 version and two slices in the 98 version.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. Plus, that sequence, it's weird. Gus Van Sant went through the effort to like do it shot for shot for that sequence, but then he intercut those two shots. One of like a goat in the middle of a field.
Yeah.
And then a naked lady wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? Very odd departure from his shot for shot remake.
Yeah. I think he kind of added a few little elements that kind of played on the imagery of the original, but why you do that, Gus Van Sant?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the shooting script was the identical script used for the 1960 film, and then they made a couple of modernizations to it. There's only two examples. Mm-hmm. One of which is the Walkman line.
Yeah, that was wild.
It was like so jarring. Like, let me just get my Walkman first.
Yeah, like that would be a line that you would cut from literally any scene in any movie, but for some reason they're like, you know what? Let's throw this in here. Let me go get my Walkman, and then she runs away from the camera. It's
a waste. Especially since you've gone so far in the film and you're like, wow, they're doing this line for line. Like, that's impressive. And then there's just this one departure and you're like, really? That's the line you were going to concede on and let be in there?
Yeah, we should, you know what we should do?
Doesn't make any sense.
We should start a side podcast. That's based around the 1998 Psycho remake.
Yes.
And the podcast is called Let Me Get My Walkman. And it is about us doing an investigation, like kind of in the style of Serial.
Yeah.
as to just like trying to get to the bottom of why that line is in this movie.
I think that's a great idea.
They do an incredibly meticulous job of doing like the dialogue word for word for the most part. But then there's like weird little things like that where she's like, "Let me get my Walkman," and you're like, "Why? Why did you choose to keep that in?"
Yeah, like why go to the effort of literally using the same shooting script?
Yeah.
And then just being like, I wonder if it was Julianne Moore's idea or if it was Gus Van Sant's idea.
It may have been.
Or the screenwriter, the OG screenwriter who's still alive.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a question. Why did they put that in? That's why we need to do this investigation.
Yeah. Ugh,
we need to be a couple of Arbogast ourselves.
I think so. Good thing you own so many fedoras, Mike.
Thank you for noticing, milady.
Just for the listeners at home, he put on a hat and then tipped it to me and said, "Milady, apostrophe LADYY. Milady. Okay, so the original Bernard Herrmann score, which we've already addressed, was adapted by Danny Elfman and Steve Bartek. So it's like a very similar, almost identical soundtrack, but they adapted it slightly, and they used vintage microphones and recorded to tape and stuff to try to emulate the sound. Also, Saul Bass did the titles for this film too.
Right. Yeah.
Which is cool.
But you can see them in color.
Exactly.
So, yeah, there are some choices in it where I was like, if the original Psycho was in color, this is the choice that they may have made. So it was kind of actually startling to see the Saul Bass stuff be in such a vibrant neon green.
Yes. Well, like it felt more like Vertigo or something, right? Like something like that. It's like, oh yeah, there's like, because Hitchcock loves his color.
Yeah.
Fascinating. He made this black and white movie so late in his career.
He did it because he had to.
I know, because of that money. The Jowls couldn't talk fast enough to persuade the financiers to give him the cash, So he had to put his money where his jowls are.
But it's also wild that movie was so cheap. It's like, why not make movies for that cheap all the time? That's like the thing about movies in general from the last 100 years. Like, why would this movie cost you more money aside from obviously the color? Cameras?
Well, here's a question, Mike. Why did Psycho 98 cost $60 million?
Well, I don't know. I assume a lot of it go into the cast.
Probably, because there are a lot of A-listers, a lot of heavy hitters.
But they also shot on location, did they not?
They shot at the exact same location as the original set.
But wasn't it on a studio lot?
Yeah, I think it was. But it was like a literal... No, I believe the Psycho house and motel are an actual location.
Interesting.
Or if it is a soundstage, it's like a backlot that's actually dirt and on the side of a road. But apparently they built the motel and the hotel directly in front of the original sets, which are still standing.
Okay.
So they built the revised one. So I think they actually had to shoot around it because you could see the original set in the background if you shot in certain angles, which is interesting. Gus Van Sant doesn't consider this a remake. He is famously adamant that it's not a remake, it's a film experiment.
Yeah, well, exactly.
But it literally is a remake. He remade the film quite literally, shot for shot, line for line. This is the second Hitchcock remake for Viggo Mortensen, who he was in A Perfect Murder in the same year, which is a remake of Dial M for Murder.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So in the same year, he was in two remakes. So interestingly, this is a similarity and a difference. So both films were nominated for stuff, but Psycho winning almost nothing. Psycho 98 won several awards, those awards being Razzies.
Oh, classic.
So one for Worst Remake, Worst Director, and Anne Hesh was nominated for Worst Actress, which I think is harsh.
Yeah, I actually thought she does
I thought she was good.
She does a pretty decent job. She doesn't have the same, I don't know, je ne sais quoi as Janet Leigh, I guess.
I agree. Anne
Hesh always kind of just seemed like a actor who just kind of exists, but I don't care about.
Well, I've never seen her in anything except this movie. I don't know who she is.
Yeah,
She's probably huge in the 90s.
She was huge in the 90s. I'm trying to remember even a movie that she was in.
So you know what's funny? There's a movie that came out in 98. I forget the name of it, but there's a poster of it on a bus stop in the shot, in the background, when she's at the four-way stop and her boss walks across.
Oh, really?
So there's literally a poster of her movie in the movie.
That's fun.
Yeah. It kind of feels like a prank.
I think Anne Hesh is in 7 Days and 7 Nights. You ever
Never
see that
seen
movie with Harrison Ford?
No. What's it about?
I think her and Harrison Ford get stranded on an island somewhere.
For 7 Days and 7 Nights?
I believe so, yeah.
So, and
she
is
also
anybody named Wilson in it?
Yeah, there's a volleyball, actually.
Oh, named Rita Wilson.
She's also in Volcano.
Never seen it.
Let's do a little deep dive here.
Yeah. This is the Anne Hesh corner.
And so, yeah. Welcome to the Hesh corner. So she was famously married to Ellen DeGeneres.
Oh, yeah.
In the 90s.
Oh, they were married in the, interesting.
Yeah. So from 97 till 2000, I think they were married. But she was in, what is she famous
Donnie
for?
Brasco.
She was in Donnie Brasco.
Wag the Dog.
Wag the Dog, yeah. Wild Side with Christopher Walken.
That's right. That's right.
She was in Psycho, 1998.
Yeah.
And Volcano.
Yeah. I mean, not a lot of good stuff on her resume.
She kind of just like was in a few things that were big and then mostly a bunch of stuff that was not.
She's in Adventure Time. She does a voice in Adventure Time. Yeah. She plays Cherry Cream Soda Gal.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So that's kind of a cool gig.
She was in I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Her being cast in Psycho was like well received. People thought she did a good job for the most part.
I thought she was good. I had no gripes about her performance.
Yeah, so yeah, kind of interesting though that she was cast on this because she was not a huge actor at the time. She was getting big, but I don't know. Yeah, just kind of, her and Vince Vaughn, kind of a weird duo.
Yeah, I thought Vince Vaughn was the worst in the cast.
Well, his acting was basically him just eating
nuts.
Candy. Yeah, eating nuts.
Yeah,
like
just chowing like a paper bag full of peanuts.
Yeah, just in a really annoying kind of way. So I think if you're into like ASMR, then this movie's for you. But
yeah,
I was like, is this his acting choice that he just eats peanuts all the time in like a really obnoxious way?
I hope not.
I hope not.
Anyways, that's basically all the shit I had on the movie. There really isn't much. I mean, it's not much has been written about it. I feel like it was made a really unremarkable splash. Oh, I guess the last thing to say is Soderbergh famously on his website did make he did two things. He did a side-by-side of the two films, and he also intercut them.
Correct.
And he switched the 98 film to black and white so that you couldn't tell which film would be which.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
I did watch part of it. I can't find it anymore. I tried to find it.
It was taken down.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was kind of cool. When I was watching these movies, I considered watching it scene for scene. So I just like watch the scene of one, then go to the next one, and then go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But at a certain point, I did watch the first two scenes that way. But then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to watch the new one first. Because I've seen the old one so many times that I kind of want to just see the new one, or the newer one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fascinating stuff.
Well, let's friggin', we've already rattled off a few differences, but let's get into it, Mike. I think the canines are salivating to hear some golden nugs straight from our jowls, okay? So let's Truffaut Hitchcock each other and really ask each other some questions on what are the differences between these two films.
I mean, it goes without saying, there's not a Walkman in the 1960s one, whereas it's made clear that Walkmans exist in this 90s one.
For the listeners at home, I'm snapping because that's such an eloquent start. I'd say this one's glaring, but one's black and white and one is color.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And the color one is more violent.
much. There's just like it's objectively more gruesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also thought, there's like they utilize like classic. Well, you know what? Here's another little interesting side note. Christopher Doyle shot this. He's one of my favorite cinematographers, and he's a famous collaborator of Wong Kar-wai.
Correct.
He shot In the Mood for Love, 2046, Chungking Express. Really talented guy, and Gus Van Sant seeked him out after watching those Wong Kar-wai films and being like, I got to make movies with this guy.
Oh, interesting.
And so he shot this film. But also, what a terrible project for a DP, because you're trying to just make it look like the fucking original movie,
But also, I found that the lighting in this movie just kind of was bland.
I agree. It's not his. He phoned it in for sure.
Yeah, the lighting in the original movie I thought was a little bit more interesting. But it's mainly probably just because they were on a soundstage, and so all of it was artificial. So it just looked a little bit nicer always.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there's a couple of scenes where they're indoors, or when she's in the hotel room, or when it's just kind of they're outside of the hotel, and it's just kind of really kind of bland and looks like a mid-90s independent film, which I guess makes sense because that's what Gus Van Sant is all about. But
yeah, it's not Christopher Doyle's best work, but it's cool that he shot it, and it was nice to see his name in the credits, in the Saul Bass credits.
Yeah. Kind of bland lighting with really kind of outdated fashion.
Yes. Another big difference here, man. 40,000, 400,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting shift. I guess 40,000, the stakes are way lower in 98.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when she steals $400,000, even now I'm like, $400,000 really? That's not that much. I mean, it is for me still, but
it's not like, it's not as criminal as it could be.
Yeah, that was an interesting change, that they changed the amount of money to make it. It's almost as if they took into account inflation.
Well, here I'm just going to look it up. So 40,000 in 1960 is equivalent to $360,883.78 today, not from 98. So it would have been worth maybe like $320 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. It's almost 400,000 now, the year we watched it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So when we're talking about differences, the movies were for the most part shot for shot. There was obviously some different shots, or they shot things different ways. One of the main scenes that they pretty much didn't follow how it was shot was the scene where they go talk to the cop.
Mm-hmm.
In the original one, they kind of do this kind of like panning technique. It goes back and forth between the characters, and like the woman's kind of in the center. And then in the new one, they just kind of shot it really boringly. This kind of shot counter shot. You just see these characters, the camera's pointing at the other person. They just talk at each other. I thought that was kind of disappointing, because that was one of the cooler scenes in the original, and also kind of takes the kind of tepid exposition dumps that the movie does and makes it a little bit more visually interesting, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But in the new one, they just kind of like, no, let's just shoot this in the most boring way possible, just to like really drive home how boring this movie's starting to get.
Especially late in the film, like it feels like it ran out of steam.
Yeah, and in that book, Hitchcock talks about it. He says that he didn't care much for that scene for the most part, because in movies like this, one of the questions they get asked is, why did they not just go to the cops? And he says, well, the reason they don't go to the cops is because it's dull to watch.
Mm-hmm. So
the scene with the police officer chasing her at the beginning of the movie is good because it adds tension to the film.
Mm-hmm.
But the scene where they go talk to the cop and he just kind of gives all this exposition, it's like, yeah, this is not really necessary. And then later at the very end, when Robert Forster plays the psychiatrist guy, that's another like exposition dump. And all of that stuff probably could have been cut out of the movie because it's all implied. We all know what's going on when they do the big
super
twist.
Interesting, Mike. The Robert Forster monologue is actually a shortened version of the original one.
Yeah, and the original
that's a
monologue,
main difference.
The original monologue, I remember seeing Psycho for the first time and be like, that is like the hugest glaring problem with this film is that scene. Because
the ending is the weakest part. The last shot's super cool. Norman Bates isolated with the blanket.
Mm-hmm.
But just terrible. Just terrible exposition dump. And like, we obviously know. And then he gives the whole backstory about how when he was like a kid and blah, blah, blah. And then like he killed his mom and the new boyfriend. It's like, who cares?
Yeah,
that's not the fucking point. This guy killed like so many people and they're all in the swamp.
Yeah, but
Shrek
I think
style.
I do think it's kind of interesting that they decided to do that in the first place. And I think it might have to do with the fact that he's more the main character of the movie than Janet Leigh is.
Yes.
Like if anybody is the main character, it's him. And he becomes the main character after he kills her. And I think that's what the original movie does so brilliantly, is that she dies. You have all this built up tension from her being murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden the movie switches like perspectives. And now you're kind of you're following Norman Bates, and you have all that tension that you have built up. And now you have the tension of him trying to get rid of the body. Mm-hmm. And then just like every time there's a new character kind of introduced who either gets killed or just is trying to figure something out, it's just like the tension of the film kind of gets transferred between all the different characters.
Yeah.
So it's not just one character. So you go from the good guy, Janet Leigh, quote unquote, the good guy, I guess. And then it goes to the bad guy. And you still are kind of invested in these people, even though they're kind of at odds with each other. And I think that's what the original movie does really well, but the new one doesn't really pull that off. I didn't feel any tension watching it.
Mm-hmm. Same. And just before I forget, because I didn't write it down, both films end with the same frame, but then the Gus Van Sant one lets the credits play as the camera moves up on a crane, and reveals like the entire police working their way through the swamp, and you just hear like banal dialogue discussing the logistics of trying to find bodies.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's an odd one, because it's so like punctuated in the original Psycho, and you're like, wow, the car is getting lifted up, like it's all discovered, and then it just goes to black. The movie's over.
Well, you also see in the background like the highway, and you just see all these cars going by.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out, what does this mean? Like, why did they do this? Because there's an obvious difference.
Mm-hmm. That felt like a disappointing sort of actual end to the film.
Well, is it just that this is happening and the rest of the world is kind of unaware of it? It's like such a singular little isolated story that doesn't really affect anything?
Or it's happening in many places at the same time.
Maybe,
because there's so many psychos, man. There's 4 psychos.
Yeah, true.
So another difference is sort of the how explicit the masturbation is, or being alluded to in both films. We do see Vince Vaughn whacking it off, watching Anne Hesh get ready for the shower, and also flush some paper down the toilet.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Not much else to say about it.
Well, also that leads into the famous shower scene, and there's some differences there. Obviously, the blood.
Well, the shots are. I don't think all the shots are the same.
The shots aren't the same. They did it. They cut it differently. You do see nudity in this one.
Very briefly, yes.
I think you see a nip here and there, but then also there's a long, very questionable shot at the very end. I don't know if you know what I'm alluding to, but where she leans over the side of the bathtub,
and it's just of her butt,
and then you get a shot right up her butthole.
Yeah, and I was like, this is the worst shot I've ever seen. Why is this in the film? We don't need this.
It was a terrible composition. Terrible composition, but then also just like you get a little bit of pooper in there, and it's like whenever I see a pooper in a movie, I'm always disturbed because you don't see it that often, and it is kind of like the thing you don't see in movies.
No, and you don't always want to.
No, you don't want to. You don't want to see.
I thought like the shower scene was really poorly done in the '98 one. I was just like, wow, this is terrible. It's so interesting. It's like weird and sexy in the 1961, but then in the '98 one, you're like, what the fuck is going on here? This is terrible.
Yeah.
Just the coverage and how they blocked it, and it's like bloodier, but like there's almost no blood, and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like this would be really messy if they're gonna like go all out. They should, And then the butt shot. I was like, wow, what a weird way to end this sequence.
I know, it was alarming,
weird.
I was thinking
feel bad
about
for
it.
Anne Hesh.
I was thinking about it for the rest of the scene.
Yeah, me too.
Because I was like, wow, that was a surprise. That BH shot.
Who made this decision?
I don't know.
What Gus Van Sant's like, we just have to do it, guys. Like, I know it's not in the OG screenplay, which we're being very faithful to. I don't have enough BHs in my movies.
But also, okay, so it was edited by a woman named Amy E. Duddleston.
Okay.
So theoretically, this person was like kind of signed off on that choice.
Yeah, yeah.
So
well, maybe she was debating with Gus Van Sant, and he's like, "Listen, I want the butt in the movie, and the butt's gonna be in the movie."
Yeah.
And the editor was like, "Okay, the butt's in the movie. We're gonna hold on to it for an excruciatingly long time."
Yeah.
Especially in a sequence with such sort of like quick frenetic cuts, and then it's just like butt, weird top angle butt. Terrible. And the shower curtain is like artfully like used in the 1960 version and not used very well in the 98 version.
Yeah.
I thought the shower curtain was much more important in the 60 version.
Yeah. However, they do I mean, because it's shot for shot and like kind of timed the same, I do think that just how much focus they put into this scene is like well done in both movies. In the aftermath, I mean, except for the butthole shot. But like the thing where it like zooms in on the drain as the blood goes down, and then it comes out of the eyeball.
Yeah,
to just
that
see
was cool.
Like it just really like makes a meal out of that scene, and I think you kind of have to because. It seems like Hitchcock, especially when he made it, it was like, I'm going to really make a meal out of this. So the audience has time to process this.
Yeah.
Just like really dwell on the fact, like, yeah, this character you like is dead. I
also love that the water stays running for so long.
Yeah.
And you just hear it in the background of both films. You're just like, wow, like it's sort of like a reminder that things were so normal a moment ago. And now the water's just moving for no reason.
Yeah.
But do you think that Alfred Hitchcock from Up on High saw the remake and he saw the butthole shot and he was just like, very nice?
Yeah, he probably did.
I wanted to do that.
Just a couple of back jowls.
Yuck.
So that is, that the butthole thing was very startling, but very like a huge difference, like to the point where I still think about it. Just because it was so jarring.
It's just fucking jarring and unnecessary. It sucked.
Yeah, it did kind of suck, and also I think the cleanup scene, where it just kind of follows the same path of the original, it follows the same path of the Janet Leigh character, where she spends so much of the first chunk of the movie just doing kind of benign, stuff like buying a new car and getting chased by the cop and buying a newspaper or getting the newspaper so she can put money in and stuff, like all of these details. The scene where Norman Bates does all the cleanup, I think the tension works really well in the original one, whereas the new one, it doesn't work so much, or it just seems like he's cleaning. No, it's just kind of you're watching a guy clean, and it kind of is lacking all the stakes.
It's very mundane in the 98 version, but you're on the edge of your seat watching a guy mop when Tony Perkins is doing it.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely captivating. You're so stressed out and you're like, holy shit. I can't believe, and like you think he's cleaning up for his mother who murdered her, right? So it's such a wonderful sort of tense scene. And then you're like confused about Tony Perkins' character because it's like, oh, so he loves his mother, but she's a homicidal titular psycho. But he's obviously like beholden to her or whatever, and it feels the need to protect her. So he's cleaning up this mess. And then to later realize that it's actually him being both people. It's like such a wonderful twist. But all of that charm and all of those pranks just don't land in the 98 version because you literally know every plot point.
Yeah. But
There's probably not a single person on the planet who saw the 98 one first when it came out and like wasn't aware.
I've read some people talk about it on Letterboxd how they saw that one first.
Oh, really?
And they said that they thought it was good because they didn't know any better.
They didn't have the context. Well, I kind of wish I could have watched it as like a virgin,
Yeah.
But we can't do it. Had to watch the seminal classic first.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when the 98 one came out and I was interested in seeing it because I had never seen the original yet.
Mhm.
But so much of the imagery of the original one was so iconic that I was aware of all of the,
Right.
like, what was going on in this new one.
Mhm.
So it was kind of, it felt like by this time you couldn't escape the imagery of the original Psycho. So that's why I kind of actually think that this remake is very clever, because it's using a huge budget, doing something that nobody would think to do and nobody would ever be given the opportunity to do. So him just being like, I'm just going to experiment and see what happens, like, when I make this. And it obviously caused, I mean, it didn't make a lot of money, but it did kind of cause the audience to react in a way. Like, a lot of people were almost offended, which I think is kind of part of the experiment. But it also kind of shows that in, like, the cleaning scene, as we talked about, like, the, Norman Bates is in the original one, we are engaged and we're, like, interested with what's going on. But because we know what's happening when we're seeing the new one, that just kind of is boring. Or it's you're just watching someone do really boring kind of tasks. So I think knowing that the audience has some sort of assumption or some knowledge, the audience has some sort of knowledge about what's happening. They should have just cut that stuff out.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it doesn't kind of carry the same weight. But maybe that was, I don't know, maybe that was the point. Just like, see how these scenes work if you have a knowledge of how all of this stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know some people talk about how if you have a knowledge of a twist ending or you have knowledge of what's going to happen, like spoilers, sometimes that makes their enjoyment a little bit better because they're less confused, so that they can kind of like figure things out and they're not spending so much time trying to deconstruct what's happening. They can actually just kind of process it a little bit more organically.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of sides to this whole experiment part, which I think is fascinating, and it kind of reveals which parts of the movie work and which parts don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or in the new one.
That's really well put, Mike.
Well, it took me a long time to say all that, but yeah.
Well, you friggin' did it, buddy, and I'm proud of you.
I also read an interesting take on it in that the new one is kind of supposed to be a comedy. In that,
I believe that.
Yeah, because you have a knowledge of the original, so there's like the horror is kind of gone, and it's almost kind of campy.
Mm-hmm.
Or that there's something kind of like wink wink about the whole thing. So because you know exactly what's going to happen all the time, you're kind of detached from it a little bit already going in. So it's more just kind of using the old school dialogue, but having it set in a modern context kind of just comes off as cheesy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I guess, I wouldn't say that's funny, but I think there's like an element of corniness to the whole thing and self-awareness.
Yeah. It definitely it's a campy film, and you're never really stressed out.
No.
In it, which like I think you should be, but it's just not a stressful film. Even the climax when Julianne Moore goes to the basement and finds the preserved mom and stuff, you're just like, well, yeah, I saw this all coming.
Yeah.
The first time I saw Psycho, I was like, holy shit, I didn't see any of this coming,
Yeah.
With the light bulb like dancing back and forth as the creepy skull lady's sitting there.
Yeah.
That's a great sequence. It's super well done, but it's absolute shit in the 98 version. But if it's a comedy or like this almost like a self-aware farce of revered cinema or something, like whatever it's commenting on, it's like, well, then it could maybe work. But nobody watched it that way.
Yeah, that's the thing. And that's kind of why it's an interesting experiment, because like, yeah, you wouldn't know how people would react unless you did it. And so he did it. Yeah. And just the audience reacted in a different way. Also, I think there's a kind of, as you said, revered love of Hitchcock himself. Mm-hmm. So he's just seen after his death. Yeah. People look back on the cock as being a genius.
Yeah. Well, and they absolutely do. And, all the negative sort of things that are associated with him are just ignored because he's like a god of cinema,
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like Gus Van Sant probably has no like love for the man, or maybe he really does, but it seems like he can be detached from the reverence that people have towards Hitchcock, Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of the reason why nobody would think to do this, because like, why would I remake something that's so good? It's like,
Well, it's like untouchable, and maybe the whole thing was that he's like, it isn't untouchable. Watch me
Yeah.
touch it.
yeah,
Watch me touch the Cock's work, most famous work, and
Yeah.
he did. He touched it.
he touched what?
He he touched the cock. He did.
No,
Not
he didn't.
dissimilar to
Because
Norman Bates.
Hitchcock was dead by that point. He didn't touch it.
No, but he proverbially touched the cock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He hitched a ride on the cock.
Nice.
That's what he did. Yeah, he hitched a ride on the cock and he said, "Look at me. I'm going to remake this movie that is oh so loved and oh so revered. And fuck all y'all. I'm going to make it and it's not going to be very good. So eat my shit." That's verbatim what Gus Van Sant said in the New York Times when he was interviewed about making this film.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Just found it right now on gusvansant.org.
Oh, wow. His
director's website.
Yeah.
Yeah. It hasn't been updated since 99, but whatever.
What's Gus Van Sant done for us lately?
What have you done for me lately?
I think lots of stuff. Let's look him up real quick.
I have seen a lot of his movies. I did watch a lot of his like post, because I know he kind of retreated into making really navel-gazy films post Psycho.
Yeah.
I think when he made Psycho, he was like, I'm going to just do something really wild and unheard of with all of this money I have and all of this Hollywood clout.
Mm-hmm.
But then right after that, he just started making, because Psycho came right after Good Will Hunting.
Yes.
After he did that, he kind of went right into making, he did Finding Forrester. So kind of going back to the same well.
Yeah.
As Good Will Hunting, almost like a carbon copy of the same movie, kind of.
And they made Jerry or Gary.
Yeah.
whatever the hell that is.
Right. So he did Jerry. Well, I remember that came out then. He did Elephant, and I saw that. That was good. It's like kind of post Columbine.
Yeah.
Last Days was like a meandering kind of thing based on Kurt Cobain, which is kind of not great, but kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Paranoid Park, I thought was really good. Yeah, because like those movies were just a lot of a camera following someone walking for long distances.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Elephant, you just see these kids walking through schools for like 5 minutes.
Through the halls. Yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of builds the tension in a really cool, interesting way. And also very probably isolating to the audience watching it and be like, this is boring. I don't want to watch these houses. Also, Paranoid Park, I think, used a lot of non-actors.
Interesting.
So if you kind of like analyze his work post Finding Forrester, his like mid to, his early 2000s kind of work, he seemed to kind of just go for stuff that was a little bit more not super populist.
He made Milk in 2008, which was like a very big film and quite popular, and like seemed like just like a more normal biopic, you know?
Yeah.
It feels like a departure from his normal thing and how he made it. But yeah, I haven't seen a ton of his stuff. I've seen more stuff in the 90s, like Drugstore Cowboy and stuff, but not like, I've never seen Elephant. I've never seen Gary or Jerry. I haven't seen Last Days. Then I saw Milk. I haven't seen Paranoid Park. Oh, I've seen Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. It's
I've
really
seen
good.
That too.
That's a great movie. I forgot he directed that. Fuck. Great film.
Yeah, I think as you said earlier, Gus Van Sant's a bit of a prankster. Or he at least is just like, he doesn't take himself too seriously, I think, in the same way as somebody else who may have handled Psycho.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If like, I don't know, if Spielberg did it at least, you know?
Yeah.
It may have been definitely way better for sure. But I think also he wouldn't have taken the chance that Gus Van Sant did to be like, I'm just going to do this shot for shot and just see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's pretty cool. even if it is stupid.
I think Gus Van Sant is like definitely a filmmaker to talk about.
Yeah.
Because his career is very eclectic, and he seems sort of uninhibited by his own clout.
Yeah.
Like he's still to this day just doing whatever the fuck he wants. You know, he's not like riding the Van Sant train.
Yeah. And he also seemed to be clever enough to be like, I made Good Will Hunting after having a string of just huge successes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so and then when he gets the opportunity to make Psycho, he's like, I'm gonna just do it in this way that nobody would ever choose to do. Just kind of maybe as an FU to Hollywood, but then also just as like, I want to see what happens. I'm a bit of a prankster. And then after that, it's like, I'm going to go back and make Finding Forrester almost as if like a fun little, like, I'm going to go back to what made me famous and just kind of play the hits a little bit. Just maybe also to cover his ass.
Could be, yeah. He could have been like, hey, I can still make a good movie. Look.
Yeah. And just like Psycho was a bomb, but I can cover my ass by making Finding Forrester. And then after that, just like, okay, now I'm going to make some weird movies that nobody wants to watch, which I thought I saw all those and I thought they were all interesting.
Yeah.
So way to go, Gus Van Sant. Way to go, Gus.
Good for you, buddy. We're big fans of you over here. And by big, I mean, we think you're pretty neat, but we don't think about you every day.
Oh, also another cameo in the 98 Psycho. Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers is in it.
As who?
He works at the hardware store.
Oh, shit. Right.
That's awesome. As Viggo Mortensen's character's like co-worker.
Brother.
Aren't
they brothers?
I don't know. It says he's has a different last name and he's the assistant.
Oh, well, they're not brothers then.
Yeah.
Brother-in-law?
Yeah. Oh, and then also supposedly Gus Van Sant made a cameo appearance, not unlike how Hitchcock would make cameos in his own movie.
Is actually in the same scene from both films.
Yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock is in the office as Janet Leigh returns from lunch from her booty call.
Yeah.
And in the Gus Van Sant film, you can see Gus Van Sant being reamed out by somebody who looks like the cock.
You know, that's really funny.
Yeah.
Like that.
So it's like a self-aware bit.
Yeah,
that's a prank.
That right there should just tell you everything you need to know about this movie.
I
kind of actually want to listen to the audio commentary and do like a deep dive on like the making of this movie. Just to see what's going on.
Should we do a 2-part episode on Psycho 1998?
Well, maybe we'll see what happens next week.
Okay.
This movie did. Oh, you're gonna say something?
No, I just said and there was nothing to follow.
This movie was interesting, but it also reminded me of an idea that I had many, many years ago. Which I believe I brought up once or twice on this podcast. But
where you film somebody bent over and you just get a clean shot of their bum.
I mean, yeah, you've done that.
Oh, yes, I have. I've worked on, actually, you know, it's funny. I've worked on 2 feature films now where I get a real clear, crisp shot of a man's asshole.
Yeah, right up the pipe.
Yeah, happened last week, Mike. Happened last week.
Wild.
I also saw a man's scrotum get squished between 2 thighs as he crossed his legs because he was naked. And I was like, oh, that's what happens to our nut sacks as we cross our legs. Ew, yucky.
But I brought it up I think once or twice, but I had an idea a long time ago to remake Citizen Kane. I always thought that would be a really funny idea because whenever they remake movies, sometimes they remake really good movies. You know, like they'll remake classics, but a lot of the time the Stone Cold classics don't get touched because they're so revered.
They're in the annals of cinema. Yeah.
And also
greatness.
They seem to remake things that are a little bit more populist, I think, or like blockbustery.
Like RoboCop.
Yeah, they'll remake RoboCop. They'll remake, I don't know, I feel like they remade Aliens, maybe.
Yeah. Well, there's just spin-offs and all that junk. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But
Batman's, Superman's.
they've remade a couple of movies that are good,
Mm-hmm.
but for whatever reason, they won't touch some movies. Like they would never touch Citizen Kane.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that would be a funny idea to like remake Citizen Kane, but then cast like Vin Diesel as Charles Foster Kane or something like that. Just
That'd be legendary.
something from the modern, or The Rock, somebody from the modern era who would really not fit, but also is like a huge star.
Yeah.
Just to
that'd
kind
be
of show
fun.
how out of touch the experiment is. But in a way, I guess that idea has been done before with the Psycho remake.
Yes, on a smaller scale, but a still equally upsetting scale.
Yeah, but also I would also rewrite Citizen Kane, I think. Because also, what is more, if a movie like Psycho is so lauded and so regarded as like a true cinema classic, isn't it not more disrespectful to rewrite the movie?
Absolutely. It's like sacrilegious.
Yeah,
It's like rewriting the Bible, bro.
exactly.
Can't do that. Yeah.
Also, what are your thoughts on the writing of the film, as in the actors from 1998 saying dialogue that works really well in a movie from the 60s, but
I thought it was like chunky and weird.
yeah, exactly.
Like all the police interaction stuff, I was like, whoa, it was like weird in 1960. Like the dialogue was odd,
yeah,
but it's extra fucking weird. And Hesh does like a pretty wild delivery of some of the dialogue. And
Yeah.
the opening scene was weird with Viggo Mortensen. Seemed really like backwards. Yeah, I don't know. It was like an interesting experiment. Like, I think you have to look at it like Shakespeare. Like, this isn't how we talk, but they're fucking talking like that in this thing.
yeah,
And we're going to just enjoy it because we know what Shakespeare is.
yeah,
And I think that's kind of how, like, similar to how you said theater, you never change the writing.
yeah.
You just change how you stage it or whatever, the aesthetic, new cast, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that's what this is, but you're not allowed to do that in film for some reason. Because
Yes.
the script isn't God, whereas in theater it is. You can't change scripts in theater. There's like a major taboo about that.
Oh, that reminds me. I saw an interesting take on this on Letterboxd. Somebody was talking about how the movie kind of is kind of supposed to be viewed as like a Brechtian kind of take on the movie. So you're not supposed to be immersed in it at all. You're supposed to be always looking at it from a distance.
Right.
So I don't know if the Kanines know about Bertolt Brecht, but he kind of had a lot of meta theater elements, or just elements that were in his plays that were supposed to take you out of like immersion.
Illustrate the artifice. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I saw an interesting kind of take on Letterboxd where someone was talking about how they say you're supposed to read it as like a Brechtian version of Psycho, where you're constantly reflecting on your own experience with the original as you're watching this new movie. So you're constantly disconnected from the movie as an immersive film.
Which is like how it's watched. Like that's how I watched it.
Yeah. But
Just
some people
thinking
don't
about
appreciate
the OG
that.
the whole time. It's cool. It's a cool
Yeah.
movie. That's
Yeah.
a really nerdy, cool take.
Yeah, exactly. But it is kind of like that great dichotomy of theater. You have the Stanislavski people and you have the Brechtian people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this movie kind of is the same kind of dichotomy of you have the immersion and then you have the complete disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So pretty cool.
Freak yeah. Any last remarks before we wrap this puppy up?
Oh, I do have one last remark actually.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, I saw
Yes.
Robert Forster in a coffee shop that I was at.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was sweet. But
Shit. Did
He
you
was-
talk to him?
no, we were just acting like we didn't see him. But
Yes.
I saw him
Played
there.
it cool.
Also, R.I.P.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He died recently,
He dead
didn't he?
now. But I saw Robert Forster in a coffee shop or as a breakfast place. And he was there with his wife and he just looked very happy.
Oh.
And Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen was on the radio and he was singing along to it.
That is really nice.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Wow, what a really positive little nugget to share. Thanks, Mike. That's great.
No problem.
Oh, man, that's great. Oh, you're full of these little positive nuggets, whether it be cat photos you text me or your Robert Forster stories. I love it. Here I am being gross and constantly saying the cock.
I mean, yeah. Speaking of the cock,
Yes.
Ebert panned this film, like the '98 one,
Uh-huh.
but he said that the masturbation scene was kind of like a metaphor for the entire thing.
Oh, cool. Like Gus Van Sant was masturbating.
Well, just that the whole thing was a masturbatory exercise, I think.
Yeah. Like just the wanting to make the film, making the film was just like, yeah, very masturbatory. That's kind of true.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little too on the nose though, Roger. Don't you think? Just because a guy's jacking off on camera doesn't mean it's about that.
Yeah.
Even though it was originally made by a guy who has the word cock in his last name, and everyone, and I mean everyone, nicknamed him the cock many years ago. And we didn't just come up with that right now on this podcast that not a lot of people listen to.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Roger Ebert.
Well, also, I feel like if he lived longer, or if we talked to him about it later in his life, he may have reevaluated himself on this. Because I do think this was a piece of film history that had that probably aged better than it probably should have.
Yeah, I think so. It would be interesting to chat with him now about it. I think, and also like it was sort of, there was nothing to compare it to as an experiment. So it's like how to feel about it. Maybe it does take 20 years to really kind of unpack the initial viewing of the film or the impetus for it and like how it sits now in the landscape that is modern movie land or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of interesting. Like, yeah, I think it sits in a more important place now than it did when it came out because a lot of people who are removed from both films, from Gus and the cock, they can like really, you know, be objective about it and maybe, argue about the Brechtian thing, or they can argue about how it's this really interesting experiment and it sort of takes the piss out of the reverence for the original or whatever. And I think there's merit to all of those arguments, which is cool.
I feel like a Leonard Maltin type would see this new one and give it like just eviscerate it in his review, and he did.
Uh-huh.
But also, I don't think it was made for him, or maybe it was made to kind of get him mad.
Yes, I mean, films are made to spite reviewers and to spite intellectuals, and I think this film definitely fits that bill.
For example, many of the works of fellow indie sweetheart Kevin Smith.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely, yeah. Sometimes you got to make a movie that costs $60 million that you're just sticking it to the man.
Yeah,
you're sticking it to the studio. You're sticking it to the man. Yeah, and that's cool. I do think like no matter how you feel about the film, I'm glad it was done. Like I like that it was made, and I like that it was made in the way it was. And it's super interesting.
Because also, if a movie like I think I may have said this on this podcast, or maybe it was on Letterboxd or something, but Psycho is such an interesting film because it is so perfect in a lot of ways, like the original one, that it's like this movie exists and we're not constantly learning from this film all the time. You know, I mean, we may have talked about that when we were talking about Citizen Kane, actually, in their first episode. It's like, this movie exists. Why are we not constantly learning from this? Why do bad movies keep getting made when we have like a blueprint for how to do it well? Yeah. And so it is kind of funny to just be like, well, this is a perfect, perfect, maybe a bit of an overstatement, but this is like an excellent film that we should all be learning from in terms of just how it presents information, how it presents tension, how it surprises the audience, plot twists, actors, like Anthony Perkins does a great job. There's so much to learn from the movie. So it's like, why would somebody think that they could remake it differently? Like, why not just like say, hey, we got a really good, we have a really perfect script here. We got a great movie. Let's just make it for a modern audience. So I don't know. I can see that logic, and also being like, maybe it didn't turn out, but why would you try and change perfection? Lots to think about.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Say it with me, Mike. This feels over.
This feels over. Yeah.
You're like you
Great
were
stuff.
frozen and you looked like when Shrek is smiling.
Thank you.
You just had a huge grin. It was really nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I was like, oh, Mike kind of looks like Shrek. If Shrek like hit the gym.
That's the nicest
You know?
thing you've ever said to me.
Yeah, I mean it.
I look like Shrek if Shrek hit the gym.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was this I'm glad we did this episode. This, like the movie, was an interesting experiment.
It was fun. And really, like, I don't think I'd go out of my way to watch Psycho 1998, so this was a good reason to do it. And they're both on Netflix right now, so it's never been easier. If you're in Canada, get some free time and watch them.
There's also a third Psycho movie on there, which is like a Bollywood film, I believe.
Yes.
So I considered making it a triple Psycho feature, but
That's a lot of Psycho.
one last difference
Yes.
to cap this whole thing off. In the new Psycho movie, apparently there is a Rob Zombie song.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wonder where.
It says
Probably in the car?
You can hear when she trades in her old car, you can hear Rob Zombie in the background.
Right.
Which I didn't really notice, but also Hitchcock didn't have a Rob Zombie track in any of his movies, as far as I know.
No, he definitely didn't.
So,
Well, shit, that's a good one to end on. We love Rob Zombie. We love Gus. We love the cock, and we love the zombie.
I love that his name is Rob Zombie. It's like got such a scary last name, and then his
Yeah.
first name is I'm Rob.
Yeah.
But if you see him and listen to him talk, he has a zombie-esque appearance and a Rob-esque voice.
Yeah, it's a perfect name for him.
Yeah, it is actually a
and
great-
his whole vibe. Yeah.
Chad Zombie.
Well, let's end this thing, Mike. It's been almost 2 hours.
I know. We should end it. All right. Well, thanks, Kanine, for listening to this. It was a fun episode.
Yeah, if you enjoyed the episode, think about mining our crypto, which is out on the market now from Justin to Coin.
Yeah.
It is valued currently at nothing, so pretty hot price.
And there's also going to be a limited amount of coin.
It's finite.
there will
15
be
trillion coins
Yeah,
is how many
15
are
trillion
out
coins.
there. They need to be mined. They're mineable until 2050. So hurry up. Time's running out.
get them coins.
Get them coins. Best of luck. Hopefully you make a little Skrilla, and happy mining. And you want to plug the old social media, Mike?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Go to Letterboxd, Twitter, Facebook, I guess, Instagram.
You always
From Justin
say-
number 2 Kane. So from Justin
you
2
always
Kane
say
with number 2.
Facebook, I guess. Like you're just so
Well,
you don't hide your disdain.
I don't go
for
on.
Facebook.
I don't go on Facebook very much, and nobody really follows us on there. We're much more popular on Twitter and slightly less so on Instagram. But
more so than Facebook.
But Facebook, yeah, I think we have like 3 or 4 likes, and they're all people that I know. And yes, and also it just reposts our Instagram post because why go on Facebook? It's such a dire place nowadays.
Yeah, and you kind of need to be like 50 or older to really enjoy the old Facebook.
Yeah, it's such a. I remember when MySpace was a thing, it was kind of cumbersome and awkward to use.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Facebook came out, it was so clean and efficient. And now Facebook is like how MySpace was.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a whole other podcast,
Yep.
which you will never
yep.
hear. We will never record that episode where we just talk about social media design.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the experiment. And honestly, I don't think there are any other films where Vince Vaughn masturbates. So this is the one.
Yeah.
Get it while you can.
Probably a deleted scene from The Wedding Crashers.
Oh, sure. Or Old School. I'm sure he
Old
jacks
School,
off
yeah.
in that. You know what? There's several films where he's masturbating, but this one is particularly off-putting.
Yeah.
See ya, Kanines.
Bye.